Well, my friends, it's taken me a while to actually talk about this, but Japan has a new prime minister. And for the first time ever, that prime minister is a woman. And she is basically Margaret Thatcher reborn. Which, I gotta say this right now, for a country that is ranked 118th out of 148 for countries in terms of gender equality, and only 10% of the seats in parliament being held by women, it is a sign that Japan is actually changing a bit going into the 21st century in a big way. She is bold, she is outspoken, she's knowledgeable, and she just might be the perfect counterpart for Japan to Chinese leader Xi Jinping. She is not soft by any means, but it then brings up a very interesting and important question. Who is Sanae Takaichi? And what does it actually mean for the land of the rising sun now that it is led by a rising daughter, if you will? Because change is coming. It absolutely is. For some people that are looking at these things, it is going to be a very bad thing. For others, it is a very good thing, depending upon your political leanings. But the important thing to take note of here is that there is going to be a lot of change. But before it is that we go and talk about Japan's possibly bold new future, we do have to talk about its bold new leader. And for that, we need to take a step back for some much needed context. And in what is probably the first time on this channel that we have focused something more exclusively on a person versus a general time period. Strange, I know, but it actually is important. And so with that, let's go ahead and dive in. But my friends, before we get back into today's episode, I would like to thank today's sponsor, Exter. Exter makes all of these products that are insanely good for travelers, from their light portable wallets that allow you to, bam, have all of your cards immediately accessible while taking up significantly less space than a traditional wallet, having slots on said wallet with the piece that you can see attached on here, which I'm going to drag down. There we go, the tracking card. An actual tracking card that allows me to track my wallet if I ever lose it through my phone. Or the newest godsend that they provided to me, which is a nylon travel bag that I'm able to use a portable, there we go, portable vacuum in order to be able to seal this and reduce its size by 60%. Thus freeing up massive amounts of space for me when it is that I am traveling, which again, as you all know on this channel, is a lot. I am quite literally out of the country every 4 to 8 weeks. Literally, all I have to do is pop this thing open, slap it in, and let it do its job. Look at that. I swear, it's literally half the size of what it was before, and I got multiple of these things, which means I'm going to have such an easy time here in the future. Seriously, thank you, Exter, for not only sponsoring my video, but simultaneously for sending me all this stuff. You have no idea how much use I'm going to be getting out of this here in the future. And you all definitely should try this as well, because it is a lifesaver. If you go and click my link down in the description and use my code, you can get additional discounts on top of what is already being done on the website. Check it out, my friends, and now back to the show. To begin, Sanae Takaichi is the kind of figure that surprises many who keep track of Japan just by skimming the headlines. But if you've ever read an in-depth Japan Times article about the LDP or any critique of her mentor, the late Shinzo Abe, it's possible that you've heard her name mentioned maybe in passing. But again, who really is this rapidly rising leader who seems to have widespread support amongst the Japanese population according to its polling data? Well, born in 1961 in the city of Yamato-Koriyama in the Nara prefecture of southern Japan, Takaichi would play the drums in a heavy metal band, which sounds pretty wild to say, especially for a modern Japanese politician, but that is true. She eventually would go and attend classes at Kobe University and the Matsushita Institute of Government and Management, and she would even move to the US in 1987, where she worked for a Democratic US Representative, Pat Schroeder, as a congressional fellow, which you may be looking at me right now and going, oh, well, Stack, what exactly is that? Well, it's kind of like an internship with a congressman or a senator, in that it's a fellowship program that lets people gain political experience by doing various tasks such as drafting memos, conducting research for proposed legislation, or engaging with constituents. If you've ever called your elected congressman and left a very angry, heated message for them, there's a very good chance that the staffer that took that message was a congressional fellow. Except, and this is the big difference here, since it's a fellowship and not an internship, congressional fellows not only get a salary for their work, but they even get benefits packages too, which, important difference. Now, these positions are highly selective, nonpartisan, and typically funded by nonprofits for the purpose of expanding knowledge and awareness of Congress and the Senate, but also to give young politicians valuable experience in the most scrutinized political landscape on the planet. The list of potential candidates can include political science majors, journalists, federal employees, health specialists, subject matter experts, military veterans, and so much more. It's really easy to imagine someone with the drive of Sanae Takaichi being inside this environment and just soaking up the experience and the knowledge and what has been presented to her. Remember, this is 1987, before the 1990s, when the process of increasing political division and corporate influence in the American government really began to grow and become a bit more of a problem that we see here now. But that's something that probably would need to be a whole other video by itself. Anyway, Takaichi would return to Japan 2 years later, having experienced so much in America in such a short period that she was able to write an entire book about her time in US Congress. She spent a couple of years as a TV news anchor, but she wanted to get involved in the making of news, not just reporting it. So in 1993, she won her first election into the Japanese version of the House of Representatives as an independent. She spent a decade serving in the House, making connections throughout the Diet, which is, again, Japan's version of Congress. And unlike almost every other prime minister before her, Takaichi came from a family of modest means. Her father worked for an automotive firm, and her mother worked for the local police department. They actually had no political connections, which means that everything Sanae Takaichi has accomplished has actually been on her own efforts, which, regardless of what you think about her politics, is something that is genuinely impressive and admirable. But anyway, back to the mid 1990s though. After 3 years as an independent, she went and joined the Liberal Democratic Party, which is Japan's traditionally dominant ruling party. And from there, she got to work. She moved up through the ranks of the LDP and was appointed to key positions, such as Minister of Economic Security. And if you know anything about Japan, you know that economic security has been one of the most wild and crazy aspects of Japanese politics in the last 20 years. So the fact that she didn't implode in such a high stress position is commendable, to say the least. Either way, at some point along the way, she would garner the attention of Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest serving prime minister. He would bring her under his wing as a protege, and she looked up to him as a mentor. And interestingly enough, another hero figure of Takaichi has always been the female Ronald Reagan of Great Britain, the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher, to whom she has been constantly compared to in the modern day and age. If anything, I dare to say that Takaichi has even more of a personality than Thatcher, though, as she comes off as some kind of cool older aunt rather than a grandmother that will break you over her knee. Yeah, kind of say what it is that you want about Margaret Thatcher. She did have a force of personality, and some people love her. A lot of people also despise her throughout history. I will leave that to you all in the comment section to decide what it is that you would like to leave. Anyway, Abe would put her in a series of different important government positions, quietly building up both her experience, but also her notoriety and influence amongst the party. Notably, she would serve as the Minister of International Communications, which is responsible for telecommunications policy and broadcast media regulations, under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe from 2014 to 2017, and again from 2019 to 2020. After that, she would make an unsuccessful bid for office in 2021, during which she received Abe's support, though he had already retired by this point. But again, it didn't really work out. And along with that, unfortunately for Shinzo Abe, before it is that he could campaign once more for his protege to become prime minister, an assassin's bullet fired from a homemade weapon would strike him down in Takaichi's very own home turf of Nara back in 2022. And that would be the end of that. And so, today, at age 64, Takaichi is determined to carry on the legacy of Abe and to bring his vision to a new generation. It is exceptionally fortunate for Takaichi that she was essentially handpicked to be his successor in the first place. 12 years after Abe famously quoted, "Japan is back," Takaichi would echo those words in a speech of her own at an international finance conference in late November of 2025, continuing on to say, and I quote, "Japan is back. Invest in Japan." End quote. Just minutes prior to the statement, in a move that Abe most definitely wouldn't have made, she had quoted the anime Attack on Titan by saying, "Just shut your mouths, invest everything in me." Like, yeah, that happened. She stopped just short of saluting by placing the bottom of her fist under her chest with the other behind her back, but otherwise, the delivery was objectively a badass statement to make when you're facing a bunch of skeptical investors who are doubtful of Japan's economic future, which, if you've seen any of my previous videos, yeah, that has been something that has been heavily in question. As it was, by the end of her well-crafted speech, the investors couldn't wait to talk specifics. She had swayed the doubtful simply with her strength of will and preparation, something which Takaichi has consistently been known for throughout the years. When it came to fiscal strategy, she would advocate for economic policies reminiscent of her mentor's Abenomics, including fiscal expansion, monetary easing, and structural reform. But now, of course, then we are getting into actual policies and politics, and that is something where the reaction of the internet has been genuinely hilarious watching all of this go down. Because, on one hand, yes, Japan has a female prime minister. On the other hand, she is not a progressive by any means. And when I say that, I am not saying that that is a morally good or bad thing. I am not saying that at all. But when you look at people's reactions on the internet and how they try to associate politics and policy, and it's very amusing to watch. That's all I'm saying here right now. Anyway, since she is more of a hardline conservative within Japan, it should be no surprise that, yeah, she opposes same sex marriage. She takes a hard line on immigration and believes that the imperial line of succession should still give preference to men. Like, she is, by all accounts, a traditionalist. She is a Margaret Thatcher of Japan. And Takaichi's victory means that Japan will continue down a path of conservative governance with a more right-wing shift, according to many experts. But also, even as I say that, I need to stress this: conservative politics in Japan are somewhat different than what you would see in the West. While Takaichi definitely wants to strengthen Japan's defense force and curb immigration and do all of these things that we would look at as traditionally more right wing, one thing that she is not going to be doing or changing is Japan's social welfare system. Aside from the previously mentioned conservative social policies, the term conservative in Japan typically refers to someone who is strong on topics of security, China, security regarding China, and maintaining a strong US Japanese relationship. It also means protecting the current system of government in place, with the emperor still retaining a figurehead role, and Takaichi has done a brilliant job so far of pushing all of these talking points. And President Trump just thinks they're best friends, whether that's true or not, which does bode well for Japan overall. In fact, in a recent speech to her people, she famously told Japan's millions of workers that she herself pledged to her countrymen, quote, "I will not abandon the idea of a work-life balance," end quote. She then promised to, much like a Rihanna song featuring Drake, work, 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 work to solve Japan's problems. And I know that we've been going on about this here for a while, my friends, but this was very important to establish because if you've seen any of the previous videos that I have done about Japan, in a country where they invented the term karoshi to describe people who literally work themselves to death because it was so common, you might not be surprised to hear that Sanae Takaichi is an unbelievable workhorse who only gets between 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night. This was, in fact, put on brutal display when she called a 3 a.m. meeting of her inner circle the night before the first day of the next parliament session. During the course of the meeting, she chastised her cabinet for complaining about the time of the meeting and yawning, stating something to the effect of, "Hey, if I can do it, you can too." Her cabinet of advisors, mostly men, then promptly shut the hell up. When questioned by reporters about the topic, Takaichi would clarify by stating, quote, "I have no intention of encouraging other people to overwork or suggesting long working hours as a virtue. I hope there's no misunderstanding," end quote. And this attitude really does seem to be catching on. In fact, Japanese women across the country have been scrambling, it seems, to copy her style, and she always dresses impeccably. Her style icon status has been boosted by her black bag, dubbed a Sanae bag, which is officially called the Grace Delight Tote. It is made by Hamano Inc., which is a 145-year-old bag maker based in Tokyo. Priced at 136,400 yen, or around 800 something dollars, it's a simple leather bag that is just large enough to fit A4-sized papers. And it's selling the best it ever has since it debuted 30 years ago, according to the company. Within literally days, inquiries and orders for the bag would surge, and all 8 colors would sell out. The bag, which is carefully made of high-quality leather, cannot be mass-produced, and those who have ordered it now have to wait until August of this next year in order to get one. Another popular item is a sparkly light pink pen Takaichi uses to take notes. It's a Mitsubishi Pencil Company's Jetstream 4-in-1. The pen, the Sanae Takaichi model, is oftentimes out of stock at stores and internet shopping sites. Those who have found one oftentimes post photos with a message saying, "Matching Sanae." And it sounds weird for me to bring all this up, especially considering how much it is that I talk about geopolitics. But the reason that I do is because it is showing the presence and power of her personality. In other words, Sanae Takaichi is currently receiving the kind of love and adoration for her people that many of the Japanese public would normally reserve for pop stars and athletes. Yes, she's not going to inspire support amongst feminists due to her conservative social policy, but she has been quickly becoming a role model and icon to large swaths of the Japanese female population. And with that, now that we know what it is that she is like, we need to move on to what she is about. We need to discuss the clear objectives that she will need to have to be a successful prime minister and the key issues that are specifically facing the Japanese state right now. Firstly, Takaichi needs to reinforce Japan's relationship with the United States. This was a key element of Shinzo Abe's time in charge of the country, as evidenced by his friendly and very cordial relationship with President Donald Trump. In fact, the first time that she met Trump, she made a wise symbolic gesture by hosting him at the Akasaka Palace, the last place that Trump met with Abe at. In a masterful display of flattery and sentiment, because we all know that Trump has a bit of an ego and is subject to this, Takaichi would invoke Trump and Abe's shared love of gold by gifting him Shinzo Abe's personal putter encased in glass. Even better, when they sat down to negotiate, Takaichi came to the table with proof that Japan was ready to take on a more active role in its own defense. This aligns rather well with the goals of the United States, which under Trump has specifically been trying to push other powers and allies to take a more active role in their own defense to reduce American dependency as well as cost. To that end, in her first week as prime minister, Takaichi would announce plans to boost Japanese defense spending to 2% of gross domestic product by the spring of 2026, accelerating the previous timeline to do so by 2 years, which is a lot. In line with her predecessors, Takaichi is seeking to bolster defense capabilities, such as counter-strike missiles, while enhancing partnerships with like-minded countries, all in order to be able to deter the shared regional threat, which is China. Because of course it's China. It's literally always China. To meet evolving modern warfare challenges, Takaichi has prioritized developing and acquiring advanced dual-use defense technologies, such as origami drones, which are innovative unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, inspired by traditional paper folding for collision resistance and self-folding capabilities. Like, imagine a drone that can crash into a wall or a building, fall to the ground, and then flex back into shape and resume its flight. That is the kind of thing that I'm referring to here. So the name is really fitting, actually. Along with that, in her first month in the prime minister role, she would outrage millions of Chinese people by completely flipping the table when it came to Japan's posture of strategic ambiguity regarding Taiwan. With islands in its territory lying less than 100 miles away from Taiwan, the brand new prime minister would state that an attack on it could amount to, quote, a survival threatening situation, end quote. And that would permit Japan to exercise collective self-defense. And that one sentence set off a furious backlash amongst the Chinese, who would claim that she is a China warhawk. Takaichi did refuse to retract her remarks, but she did say that she was speaking hypothetically, and she would refrain from making similar statements in the future. Like, look, I know this doesn't sound really all that serious, but this controversy got so intense that the Chinese consul general stationed in Osaka threatened to behead Takaichi in a tweet, stating, quote, we have no choice but to cut off that dirty neck that has been lunged at us without hesitation. Are you ready? End quote. He then topped it all off with an angry face emoji. Wow. So tough. So impressive, I guess. Like, how am I supposed to react to this? He threatened a politician on X. Later on, he would go and take the tweet down and said that the comments were made on a personal level, not a professional, which, for a diplomatic entity is a really big no-no, whatever exactly that's supposed to mean. Sorry, I didn't mean to threaten your life for personal reasons, just, professional. Like, is that genuinely the best excuse that one could come up with? Either way, he faced no real repercussions, but the die has been cast already, and China has realized that it might have awoken a sleeping giant, and that sleeping giant's name is Sanae Takaichi. With this deadlock, economic channels and trade relations are now under duress. For instance, China has already issued a no-travel advisory for Japan, heavily affecting the large number of tourists, about 7.5 million people, from January to September alone this year. Chinese airlines have been offering refunds for flights heading to Japan. Trade retaliation measures also include bans on Japanese seafood and films, and authorities have put an upcoming trilateral cultural ministerial meeting between China, Japan, and South Korea on hold for now. Really, the whole situation has been bad for trade relations between two economic superpowers. China ranks second amongst Japan's export markets. In 2024, it imported approximately $125 billion from Japan, whereas Japan imported $152 billion of its merchandise from China. And yeah, political crises have derailed Sino-Japanese relations in the past. Examples of that include the 2023 Fukushima ban on food imports from Japan and China's 2010 ban on rare earth exports. But besides economic and trade disruptions, territorial tensions have been only increasing as time goes on. According to sources in Japan, the recent activities of the Chinese Coast Guard within the territorial waters near Japan's administered Senkaku Islands, which China claims as the Diaoyu Islands, prompted the Japanese government to condemn the actions for crossing the water boundaries. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning on November 23rd would defend the Chinese Coast Guard patrols in the East China Sea. But it goes further than that. Additionally, the Chinese Education Ministry has advised Chinese students in Japan to remain alert to potential risks, whatever exactly it is that does mean. Anti-Chinese sentiment is something that has been building in Japan for a while, even as anti-Japanese sentiment has been increasing in China for a while. It's something that is a little bit complicated. As for the whole issue with Taiwan, though, Japan knows that Taiwan is holding their next presidential elections in 2028. And if you only track American politics or don't follow politics at all, this election for president of Taiwan in 2028 might be one race that you actually want to check on. Why? Well, because it's possible that this could be the single most impactful presidential election in modern history, because if the Democratic Progressive Party, who are determined to resist China, win the election, it could be the igniting factor in a possible World War III scenario. Now, is it super likely to happen? Probably not, though, of course, any number of weird things can happen within geopolitics, but it's always significantly more complicated than people give it credit for, especially when money is involved in these things. And I'll let you think of that what it is that you will. For Taiwan, trade and imports from China help to keep everything running. These business ties are extremely important. So they don't want a conflict just as much as the Chinese do not want it in order to potentially ruin everything that has been built up in terms of global trade for the last several decades. The one big problem is that whenever the Chinese Communist Party faces a foreign challenge, they respond to by whipping up Chinese nationalism. The danger of this is that the more and more that they use this tactic as an effort to divert people's frustrations, the more that they paint themselves into a corner where they can't compromise with Japan, or they will look like they betrayed the very public fury that they had fostered in their people in the first place. It's kind of a lose-lose situation that just kicks the can a little bit further down the road until eventually something has to break. The United States government has recently approved over $1 billion of additional weapons and ammunition for Taiwan, which is a strong sign to Beijing that the US has Taiwan's back. So maybe now, after all that explanation, you can finally see how the one remark made by Sanae Takaichi could have caused such a shitstorm. The Chinese citizens are basically taught to hate the Japanese, so it becomes easier and easier to imagine violence being carried out upon them. Takaichi will have to navigate a political minefield dealing with this topic, so we're only going to have to wait and see how it is that she does. Another place where Takaichi will need to be proactive is in regards to the military itself and how she handles its use and its funding. And she's already taken big strides to accomplish this. There are strong indications that 2% has gone from being the ceiling for Japanese defense spending to it being the new floor. The argument goes that more money is required not only to fund these new initiatives, including acquiring nuclear-powered submarines, but to offset a decline in Japan's purchasing power parity thanks to inflation and a weak yen. This spells bad news for China yet again, and all of this leads to the last pillar of Shinzo Abe's legacy that she has yet to fulfill: the rewriting of Japan's constitution to remove Article 9, which outlaws war as a means to settle international disputes involving the state of Japan. Now, this law was essentially put in place just after World War II for very important and very obvious reasons for anyone who's familiar with it. But by this point, 80 years later, it serves only as a limiting cage for a country that has rooted out its once famous fanaticism and nationalism in exchange for economic prowess. If Prime Minister Takaichi can have this law amended, it will solidify her legacy as the most impactful prime minister of all time in Japanese history. Now, of course, that is a big if, because at the moment, many things will have to fall into place first for that to be possible. But for someone so prepared, organized, and disciplined as Takaichi has shown herself to be, it might be possible. She still needs to build more support amongst the Japanese politicians and voters before that dream could even be close to becoming a reality, though. But again, we will see. Takaichi has the unenviable task of balancing the demands of warring factions within her party, forming shaky coalitions with other parties, and remaining in the good graces of the Japanese public. She must accomplish this also while aiming to match Abe's ability to maintain U.S. security guarantees in the Indo Pacific and fend off Trump's punitive economic measures. With Washington looking more inwards and the effects of the current administration's domestic policies being somewhat contentious, Tokyo must revitalize its leadership role in the Indo Pacific and take bold steps to provide security and defense against the dangerous regional threat that it used to embody itself. When it comes to Sanae Takaichi, though, you can be assured that we here at the channel will be watching her career with great interest. And when she does something noteworthy, we of course will be here to bring you the story. Thank you, my friends, for watching. That is the end of things here today. Please, by all means, check out Patreon if you can to go and support us, because obviously a lot of the topics that we talk about here are a little bit difficult to discuss, to say the least, at least on YouTube. But there is plenty more things to come, and I do appreciate all of you. Thank you very much. Let me know in the comment section below what it is that you'd like to see next, and I'll see you all here next time. Goodbye, my friends, and best of luck.